Have you ever decided to teach yourself a fairly niche programming language despite having almost no coding experience? Well, I did. About a year ago, I began work on my horror visual novel. It's currently called The Spookier Story because I'm great at names. From April 2025 to April 2026, the focus was just on writing the story. Over the past couple months, I've been focusing more on, actually programming the game. And I was like, this is just my first game. I should keep it simple. And yes, I should have. I'm making the game in RenPy, a pretty popular visual novel game program. I started off by creating a sort of little mock game where the characters were present on the screen, they said a few lines, they moved around a little, and then the game ended. Honestly, this was largely done by copying and pasting the game code for the question into my own code and then editing and building off of it. The question is the fake game that RenPy comes with as a tutorial. And as I did this, I referenced the official RenPy documentation. It's partly a guide, but more of a record of all the things that RenPy can do and how it does it. The quick start section is very aligned with what you see in the tutorial. So being able to go back and forth between the tutorial and quick start was incredibly helpful. Making the short mock game took maybe 3 hours tops, if you count the time that was spent reading extra material like the quick start guide. And once I had that done, I was like, this isn't so hard. Now I'm ready to make the game for real. Or so I thought. Up on the screen is my to-do list for the game, which I am constantly adding onto. And I decided the first thing I would do would be to include the option to have the two main characters have customizable names. These characters are true best friends, and I love the idea that someday maybe two friends would play my game together, name the characters after themselves, and then proceed to get all the worst endings. Anyway, I thought it would be really easy to program this because I assumed that many RenPy games must have this feature of including customizable names and also including things that the player cannot have as the name, like, a swear or something like that. So apparently it's not as common as I thought, or it's just so common that no one talks about it. Either way, it just took me surprisingly long to find a good resource, not just for how to customize the names, but, also prevent people from using words I don't want them to use as the names. It took a couple days, but it's done, though I was, again, still surprised by how long it took. It felt like an unreasonably hard way to start off programming the game, but you know what? I figured this was probably going to be the trickiest thing I did. And no, it was not. My next task was to create places on the screen where you can click an image and this decides what species you are and what species your best friend is. And programming this took an unreasonably long amount of time. Oh, and by the way, the art on the screen is what you're seeing that I made for these screens. To like click the different things. Of course, these are rough drafts, but basically you would like click the werewolf one and bam, you would be a werewolf. It took me about a week to figure out how to program this. A total, it was maybe around 5 hours, but it was spread out because I just kept hitting so many dead ends and having to take a break. So do you remember the point and click games where you click on different objects on the screen to make hints appear or add stuff to your inventory? So it turns out there are a lot of different options to add this kind of function to a RenPy game. And some of them don't involve images, but they're discussed in the same section as image-related point and click options in the RenPy documentation. And also, if you want multiple places on one screen for people to be able to click, there's extra layers to that too. And there's also different ways to approach that. So at this point, I was like just trying out different things and just getting errors constantly. I knew I was on the right track. It seemed like I needed some kind of image map with hotspot statements, but I was just banging my head against a wall wondering why this was so hard for me. Because the official RenPy documentation is extremely comprehensive, so it's not like I was lacking access to the information that I needed. My brain just couldn't quickly parse through what was relevant to me and what wasn't. I'd try to look up tips online, but they'd also be pointing in different directions, and I just was struggling to envision how it should look in my code specifically. Most of you are probably familiar with the different kinds of learning styles. So there's visual, auditory, read, write, and kinesthetic. I am an extremely visual learner. And the way that RenPy documentation and various forum resources, like, the RenPy Reddit, the way that they are set up don't always necessarily work for my particular style of visual learning. I realized I needed to find a more visual example, otherwise I was never going to figure this out. So I looked on YouTube to find examples, and you're probably wondering why I didn't do this earlier. So RenPy updates quite frequently, which is good. But a lot of the popular YouTube resources are from a few years ago, so some of them might not be relevant or useful, or just might have outdated information that is not going to work in your code, even if it looks like it should be correct. Luckily, it didn't take too long to comb through results and edit my search a few times to find the most recent video on image maps that was available. And that leads us to one thing in RenPy that keeps throwing my brain for a loop. RenPy is based on the coding language Python. I don't know the exact degree of the similarities between them. I know it's not a one-to-one, but there are Python statements that you can use in RenPy. So as I understand it, one part of the similarity is a type of logic Python uses. The terms I'm going to be using aren't necessarily correct or official. They're just how I recall or am understanding these things right now. I'm going to do my best to use correct or official terminology, but obviously I am not an expert, so I do apologize if anything is incorrect. So basically you can set a rule for a game. I think this is officially called defining something. So we'll start with an easy example. I wanted to have the main character's name appear in a particular color. So I defined the rule MC name, which is shorthand for main character name. And this means whenever this name is appearing, it will be in this blue color. So bam. That will be whenever the character appears on the screen, her name will be in that color. And then there are other rules or their definitions up here as well. So I began to see the game code as being separated into two main parts: before the start of the game and after the start. Before the start is like a list of rules and definitions for the game. Then below the start is, where the game is, where you basically share what the player will see and do in the game. So it made sense to me with this logic that the first thing that appears beneath the start point is the coding of the very first screen that the player sees, which is where you get to choose the custom names. But apparently I was wrong. I found a good example on how to create a screen with various images, which you set up as hotspots. The process for doing this turned out to be really cool and kind of really fun in my opinion. I'll link the video that I used down below. However, I kept trying to code this screen below the start label because in my mind, this is a screen that appears in the game, so it needs to be coded in the game after the start, right? No, it doesn't work that way. Because basically this is another definition. It's defining what the screen is like and what its functions are before the game. And then to call upon that definition and make the player see and interact with it, I have to call the screen below the start point in the game itself. I don't entirely understand this, honestly. It took me much longer to figure this out than it should have. I really do want to understand why it's necessary to set it up this way. I'm sure I'll learn eventually. Right now, I just am still a little confused. Don't get me wrong, I still like this overall organizational style, and I think the Python statements are super useful and fun. For example, up here before the starting point, I've defined FP, which are friendship points. How well you and your best friend get along is one of the main things that determines what does and does not happen in the game. And this is just impacted by the choices that the player makes. I wanted to start off at 0 points, so I defined it as such up here. Then down below, see this $sign? I don't know why it's a $sign exactly. It's some kind of Python thing, but basically if you are CW, which means that you chose for the player character to be a werewolf, you automatically get 3 friendship points just on the virtue of being a werewolf. Anyway, now that I know what a die-hard visual learner I am, I'll definitely be seeking out more YouTube and so on resources earlier in the process, even if it means that I have to comb through old videos to try and find something that is up to date. I am really hoping that by learning all the things now and understanding why they work, how they work, and so on, that'll make it easier for me to fix any bugs that people encounter. I really do want this game to run just as smooth as silk, and that is truly an easily achievable goal for a first-time game developer. What's your programming experience like? If you spotted anything that I said that was inaccurate, either regarding Python or RenPy, I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Or if you're thinking of doing a game or have done a game, I'd really love to hear your experiences. Side note, I know that there's like the achievements in Steam, and I want to do that, but I also want to figure out how to program like cute badges that you can unlock for the main menu screen just for like big developments or achievements and stuff. Like, let's say you get a good ending and you're a werewolf, you can get like the good girl trophy or something like that. I want to figure out how to do that. I think that would be really fun. Anyway, please let me know your thoughts down below, and I'll see you in another video. Bye bye.